All right, today we are going way back to the very beginning. We're talking about psychology's Big Bang. We're going to explore its very first school of thought, structuralism, and this wild, revolutionary idea that you could actually map the human mind.
But it all starts with a question that, when you think about it, sounds kind of impossible, right? How do you take something as private and personal as a thought, or as quick and fleeting as a feeling, and actually study it like a science? For centuries, that wasn't a question for scientists at all. It was a puzzle left to philosophers.
But here's the thing about science. It doesn't just slowly evolve. Sometimes it has revolutions. The philosopher Thomas Kuhn called these paradigm shifts, these huge moments where all the old rules get tossed out and a brand new way of thinking takes over. And today, we're diving into psychology's first great paradigm shift, the exact moment the mind stopped being a philosophical mystery and became a scientific subject. Now, to really get why this revolution happened, we have to look at the crisis that caused it. For literally thousands of years, the mind was the exclusive territory of philosophers. But, they were hitting a wall. This timeline kind of shows how we got to that wall. I mean, it started way back in ancient Greece, with Plato and Aristotle, and their idea that knowledge builds on itself. Then you fast forward to the 1600s, you've got Descartes saying the mind and body are separate things. Then John Locke comes along and argues, no, experience is what shapes the mind. But by the 1800s, they hit a limit. Asking the big questions just wasn't cutting it anymore. They needed a way to study the actual mechanics of the mind.
And you know what a crisis creates? An opening, an opportunity for a brand new approach. And it was spearheaded by one man who decided to do what nobody had done before. He decided to put the mind under a microscope.
And this is the guy, Wilhelm Wundt. In 1879, in Leipzig, Germany, he opens the very first laboratory dedicated entirely to psychological research. And with that one move, he basically plants a flag and declares psychology as science, totally separate from philosophy and physiology. So this is the crucial part. Wundt carved out this totally new space. He said, look, philosophy can keep asking the big why questions. Biology can study the physical brain, the blood and mushy bits, as one source so nicely puts it. But psychology? Psychology was going to explore that vast, complex world in between, the whole conscious experience.
So, you've got a new science. Now it needs a mission, a goal. Wundt called his school of thought structuralism, and its ambition was, well, it was nothing short of revolutionary.
So what exactly is structuralism? Well, it's the belief that our complex conscious experience, like you listening to me right now, is actually built up from smaller, more basic components. The goal then was to identify these fundamental building blocks of the mind.
And here's the best analogy for their mission. Just like a chemist breaks down water into hydrogen and oxygen, Wundt wanted to create a periodic table of the mind. He wanted to find the basic elements of consciousness. I mean, can you imagine how ambitious that was? Incredible.
So how on earth did they do this? Their main tool was a method called introspection. Basically, a trained subject would be exposed to a stimulus, something simple like a light or a sound, and then they would have to report back only the most basic sensations, feelings, and images that popped into their head. The key was to try and not interpret the experience at all.
So what they were really doing, essentially, was seeing the mind as a complex machine. And if it's a machine, then in theory, you should be able to take it apart, identify all the little gears and levers, and understand how they all fit together to create the whole thing.
But this whole mechanical approach, it brings up a huge question, doesn't it? Can you really understand the incredible richness of being human by just breaking it down into a list of parts? Does putting people's inner worlds into neat little boxes really capture what it feels like to be alive? Well, that very problem was about to spark another revolution.
And that question, about the limits of breaking the mind down into pieces, led directly to the next paradigm shift. A new school of thought came along, and it wasn't there to tweak structuralism, it was there to challenge its entire foundation.
Over in America, a scholar named William James had a totally different idea. He was heavily influenced by Darwin, and he argued that consciousness isn't a collection of static parts you can just pin down and catalog. No, he saw it as a continuous, flowing stream of thoughts that's always changing and adapting.
And that really gets to the heart of the debate. Wundt and the structuralists were asking, what is the mind made of? But James and the functionalists, they asked a different and maybe more practical question. Why do we have a mind? What's its purpose? How does it help us survive?
And let me tell you, this debate got fierce. Wundt just completely dismissed James's work. He famously said of functionalism, it is literature, it is beautiful, but it is not psychology. Ouch. To him, this new approach wasn't scientific enough. It was abandoning the rigorous, elemental method he had created.
So, who won? Well, it's interesting. While structuralism as a formal school of thought kind of just faded away, the debate it started, that was the real victory. It ended up shaping the fundamental questions psychology would be asking for the next 100 years. Because this rivalry, this was psychology's first big argument. It gave birth to one of the most famous questions in the whole field, the nature versus nurture debate. Is our behavior determined by our internal structure, our nature, or is it shaped by its function and how we adapt to our environment, our nurture? That tension became the engine for so much psychological research.
So, what's the big takeaway here? Why does this matter? Well, structuralism, for all its flaws, was absolutely crucial. It's what got the ball rolling and established psychology as a science. But then functionalism came along and broadened the whole field, asking about purpose and adaptation. And their conflict just shows you a fundamental truth. Ideas build on ideas, and sometimes even opposing views are exactly what you need to push knowledge forward.
And that leaves us with a question for you to think about. When you look at your own life, do you see your actions more as a product of your fundamental internal makeup, your parts, or as a result of how you adapt and function out in the world? The first great debate in psychology is still very much alive inside every one of us.